I want you to imagine something with me for a moment. You're standing in a quiet room full of people, and every single one of them is there for one reason: to say goodbye to someone you loved. The air is thick with the smell of flowers and candle wax, the kind of smell that almost feels heavy in your lungs. You can hear the faint hum of an organ playing in the background, people whispering their condolences, the occasional sniffle from someone in the back. And you're standing in front of a framed photo of the person you built your life with, the person you swore you'd grow old with, but never got the chance. You're telling yourself to be strong, to hold it together for your child. But then, your child leans in, grips your hand just a little too tight, and whispers, "Mom, he's standing right behind you." Now, I don't know about you, but if my child ever said those words to me in that moment, I think my heart would stop before I even turned around. That's exactly what happened to me, and I can tell you right now, nothing, absolutely nothing, in my life prepared me for what happened after. And before you even think about looking away, let me just tell you, by the end of this video, you're going to know exactly what my son saw, exactly what I turned around to face, and why I'm still questioning if I even survived it at all. This is one of those stories you can't pause halfway through, because every single detail matters. So, if you're here because the title pulled you in, trust me, you came to the right place. You know, I've always believed that funerals bring out two things in people: grief and truth. Sometimes, that truth is whispered in quiet corners, shared in tearful confessions. Other times, it bursts out in ways that feel like they belong in a horror movie. And that day, my husband's memorial, it was both. It was grief so deep it felt like I was drowning, but it was also truth, the kind of truth that makes you question if everything you thought you knew about your life was a carefully constructed lie. When my son whispered those words to me, I felt like the floor shifted under my feet. But what really chilled me to my core wasn't what he said, it was the look on his face. If you've ever seen a child truly afraid, and I'm not talking about scared of the dark or afraid of a spider, I mean deep, gut-level fear, you know it changes their entire expression. My son's eyes weren't just wide, they were locked on something just past my shoulder, unblinking, like he was watching something move toward us. His lips trembled, and he squeezed my hand hard enough to hurt. And for a split second, I didn't want to turn around. I didn't want to know what he saw, because deep down, I already knew there was nothing back there that should be there. Before I tell you what I did next, I want you to understand something about my husband and me. We weren't perfect, no couple is, but we loved each other in a way that made people believe in forever. We'd been together since college, built a life in a small town where everyone knew us, raised our son in a home filled with laughter, late-night kitchen dances, and Sunday pancakes. And then, in a single moment, all of that was gone. A car accident. One phone call. No goodbye. And for 3 weeks leading up to his memorial, I told myself the same thing over and over. He's gone. He's not coming back. You have to accept it. But standing there that day, with my son gripping my hand and whispering those words, it was like the universe was daring me to believe otherwise. People tell you kids have overactive imaginations, that they see things we can't explain, because their minds are still wide open. But what my son said that day wasn't playful. It wasn't an imaginary friend or a made-up story. It was urgent. It was a warning. And if you've ever had someone warn you about something you can't see, you know the instinct that kicks in, your heart races, your stomach knots, and suddenly every sound in the room feels too loud, every shadow too dark. I remember feeling like everyone in that memorial hall had vanished except for me, my son, and whatever was standing behind me. I'm telling you this story because I know there are people out there who've had moments they can't explain. Moments that don't make sense in the daylight, but at night, when you're lying in bed replaying them in your head, they keep you awake. Maybe you've heard footsteps in an empty hallway. Maybe you've picked up a photo and felt a shiver down your spine. Or maybe, just maybe, you've felt someone standing behind you when you know you're alone. If you've ever had one of those moments, you're going to understand exactly why what happened next changed everything for me. I wish I could tell you I turned around right away, but I didn't. Instead, I froze. My son's grip tightened, and I could hear my sister's voice somewhere nearby, quietly talking to a family friend, completely unaware that my entire world had narrowed to the space just over my shoulder. The music stopped. That's the first thing that made me realize something was wrong. The organ that had been softly playing just stopped. And in that sudden, heavy silence, I swear I heard breathing that wasn't mine. I want you to keep watching, because the moment I finally turned around, the moment my eyes landed on what was there, is the moment my husband's memorial became something I'll never forget, not for the rest of my life. And when you hear what I saw, you're going to have questions. You're going to wonder if I was imagining it, or if something much darker was at play. But I promise you, every word of what I'm about to tell you is the truth. And the strangest part? That day wasn't the first time I'd felt him behind me since he died. It was just the first time someone else saw him too. It's strange, the things you remember about a day that changes your life forever. You don't remember every single moment, but the smallest, most insignificant details burn themselves into your brain like photographs you can't throw away. I remember the way the light came in through the stained glass windows, throwing streaks of red and gold across the floor, and how dust floated in the air like it had nowhere else to be. I remember the faint creak of the old church pews as people shifted in their seats. I remember my son's tiny, trembling hand gripping mine like he thought I might disappear if he let go. And I remember that stillness, the way the air felt heavier after the organ stopped playing, as if the room itself was holding its breath. In that silence, my thoughts were louder than the people around me, a chaotic swirl of fear, grief, and confusion. I kept telling myself it was impossible, that my husband was gone and nothing could change that, but the part of me that still clung to him was begging me to turn around and see for myself. I didn't turn right away, because my son's eyes told me not to. I can't explain it, but I could see it in his face. Whatever he saw behind me, he didn't want me to look. And yet, I could feel it. That's the only way to describe it. The presence. You know how you can tell when someone is watching you, even from across a crowded room? Multiply that by 10. It was like a weight pressing against my back, a silent force that made my skin crawl. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. I wanted to squeeze my eyes shut and block out everything, but I knew if I did, I might miss the one chance to understand what was happening. I tried to focus on anything else, the flowers at the altar, the faces in the crowd, but my mind kept circling back to the same question. If it really was him, why now? When my husband was alive, he had a way of making every room feel warmer just by being in it. He'd walk into a family gathering, and suddenly everyone would be laughing louder, talking faster, leaning closer. He wasn't perfect. He had his secrets, same as anyone, but he had a presence. And now, standing there in that suffocating silence, I felt something entirely different. This wasn't warmth. This was cold, calculated, like someone had stepped in who didn't belong. My son didn't move, didn't blink, didn't even breathe differently. And in that frozen moment, the memory of the week before his death came rushing back. The arguments whispered late at night when we thought our son was asleep, the phone calls he wouldn't explain, the way he started double-locking the back door like he was afraid of something. I wish I could tell you I noticed those things in time, but I didn't. Back then, I chalked it up to stress from work, or maybe a midlife crisis creeping in early. We'd been married for 12 years. We'd been through job losses, family illnesses, even the stillbirth of our first child, and we'd survived. But the last month before the accident, he was different. He was quieter, his smiles didn't quite reach his eyes, and sometimes I'd catch him looking out the window at nothing, as if he was waiting for someone to appear. I never asked him who, because I was afraid of the answer. And now, in that church, I wondered if the answer was finally standing behind me. From the corner of my eye, I caught movement, just the faintest shift in the shadows near the back of the hall. My breath hitched, and for a second, I thought maybe I'd imagined it. But my son's grip on my hand tightened again, and that was all the confirmation I needed. He was seeing it too. My sister noticed me stiffen and gave me a questioning look from a few feet away, but before I could say anything, someone near the front cleared their throat and started speaking. The pastor, beginning the eulogy. His voice was calm and steady, talking about my husband's kindness, his humor, the way he cared for people. I tried to focus on his words, but they felt far away, muffled, as if they were coming from underwater. While everyone's attention was on the pastor, my son leaned in again, his lips brushing my ear. Mom, he whispered, so quietly I almost didn't catch it. He's smiling at you. My whole body went rigid. I didn't dare turn. Not yet. I kept my gaze fixed on the flowers at the altar, but inside, my mind was screaming. If it was him, and that was a massive if, why would he be smiling? And why could my son see him when I couldn't? What happened next is something I still can't explain without getting chills. The air shifted. That's the only way I can put it. Like when a storm is rolling in, and you can feel the pressure change before you hear the thunder. I felt a cool breeze brush the back of my neck, even though the windows were closed. My son shivered beside me. I glanced around, and that's when I noticed her. A woman sitting 3 rows back on the left side, staring at me instead of the pastor. I didn't recognize her. She wasn't crying, wasn't even pretending to be mourning. She was just watching me, her eyes unblinking. And the strangest thing? When my gaze met hers, she smiled. Not a warm smile. A knowing one. I looked away quickly, pretending to listen to the eulogy, but my heart was pounding harder than ever. Who was she? And why did it feel like she knew exactly what was happening? My mind started racing, connecting dots that didn't belong together yet. The locked doors. The late-night calls. The way my husband seemed to be waiting for someone. And now, here she was, in the middle of his memorial service, smiling at me like she'd been expecting this moment all along. I didn't know it then, but she would become the key to everything. The reason my son saw what he did. The reason I'd eventually learn that my husband's death wasn't the end of our story. It was the beginning of something far darker. And just as I started to process that thought, my son let go of my hand for the first time since we walked in. He turned his head slowly, his gaze following something moving through the room, something I still couldn't see. Then he looked back at me, his voice trembling when he whispered, "Mom, he's walking toward us." The way my son said those words made my stomach twist in a way I'll never forget. His voice was quiet, but it carried a weight that didn't belong to a child. Like, he wasn't just telling me what he saw, he was warning me. I wanted to turn around so badly, to see what he was seeing, to confirm whether it was my grief making me imagine things or if something truly unexplainable was happening in that room. But there was this strange, primal instinct holding me in place, whispering in my mind that once I looked, I couldn't unsee whatever was there. It felt like the air between my shoulder blades was charged, like static before lightning strikes, and my body wouldn't move no matter how much my mind screamed at it to. All the while, the woman with the knowing smile sat perfectly still, watching me like she was waiting for the exact second I'd give in and look. The pastor's voice droned on in the background, but it was as if the rest of the room had faded away. My son's wide eyes tracked something moving closer, and I realized his breathing had changed, shallow, shaky, like every inhale was an effort. I glanced at him, and in that moment, he looked so much like my husband it hurt. Same shape of the eyes, same crease in the brow when he was focused. It was like looking at a smaller version of the man I'd lost, and it made the thought of him seeing something dangerous feel unbearable. I reached for his hand again, but before I could touch him, he whispered, "Mom, he's not alone." My heart lurched so hard I almost stumbled. Not alone. My husband, or whatever my son thought he saw, had someone with him? I couldn't wrap my head around it, and suddenly that charged feeling in the air felt sharper, like it was closing in. Out of nowhere, a loud crash echoed from the back of the hall. Several people gasped, turning to look. My body jerked toward the sound before I could stop myself, and that's when I saw it. Or rather, I saw the space. A path had opened between the pews, almost like people had shifted without realizing it, leaving a clear line from the entrance to where I stood. And at the very back, just inside the open double doors, stood a man. My vision blurred for a moment because my brain refused to accept what I was seeing. He was tall, broad-shouldered, wearing the same dark suit my husband had been buried in. His head was slightly tilted, as if he was studying me from a distance. I couldn't see his face clearly. The light from outside cast him in shadow, but I could swear I recognized the way he stood, the way his hands rested at his sides. My heart was pounding so hard I felt dizzy, and I heard my sister's voice beside me, asking if I was okay, but it sounded far away, like She was speaking through glass. Before I could take a step toward him, he moved. Not quickly, not dramatically, just a slow, deliberate step forward, like he had all the time in the world. And then, from the corner of my eye, I saw the woman again. She wasn't sitting anymore. She was standing at the edge of the aisle, facing him. There was something about the way she looked at him, not afraid, not shocked, but almost expectant. Like she'd been waiting for him to show up. That's when I realized she wasn't there for me, at least not directly. She was there for him. And if that was true, then she knew exactly what was going on. My mind was a mess of questions. How could this be happening? Was I losing my grip on reality? Was this some cruel trick of grief? Or was my husband somehow here, in whatever form my son was seeing, and connected to this strange woman? As the man in the suit moved closer, the temperature in the room seemed to drop. People began rubbing their arms, whispering to each other, looking around as if they too felt something shift but couldn't quite place it. And then, something I will never forget happened. My son, who had been frozen with fear, suddenly let out a small, almost relieved laugh. "He's saying something to me," he murmured, his gaze fixed on the figure. I leaned down, my pulse thundering in my ears, and asked what he was saying. My son's eyes flicked to mine for just a second before he whispered, "He says you're not supposed to trust her." It felt like the floor dropped out from under me. I didn't even have to ask who her was. My mind went straight to the woman standing in the aisle. She had started moving now, slowly making her way toward the man, and I could see her lips moving, though I couldn't hear her words. The crowd was distracted by the lingering echo of the crash, so no one else seemed to be paying attention to the silent exchange happening just a few feet away from me. My instinct screamed that whatever was going on between them wasn't meant for anyone else to witness, and yet here I was, trapped in the middle of it. I wanted to pull my son close, to get us out of that room, but I couldn't seem to make my legs move. It was like the space between the man and the woman was pulling me in, like a magnet I couldn't fight. My son's grip on my hand was the only thing keeping me tethered to reality. Then, just as the woman reached him, the man turned his head, and for the briefest moment, I saw his face. It was my husband. Pale, drawn, and wrong somehow, but undeniably him. And before I could call out, before I could take even one step forward, he looked straight at me and mouthed something I couldn't hear, but I understood. It was my name. And then, in the blink of an eye, both he and the woman were gone. The room seemed to snap back to normal. The pastor's voice filled the air again. People shifted in their seats, and it was as if nothing had happened at all. But my son, and I knew differently. And as I stood there, my heart still racing, I couldn't shake the feeling that whatever had just happened wasn't over. It was only the beginning, and the real danger hadn't even shown itself yet. When the memorial ended, people moved slowly toward the exit, some stopping to hug me, others placing a hand on my shoulder and offering soft words of comfort that barely registered in my mind. I was still reeling from what had happened, from seeing my husband standing there, from the woman's piercing stare, from my son's trembling voice warning me not to trust her. My body felt heavy, like I was moving through thick water, my senses heightened in a way that made every sound sharper, every touch almost startling. My son stayed glued to my side, his little hand locked around mine, his eyes darting around the room as if making sure no one was following us. I wanted to get us out of there, away from all the curious eyes and quiet murmurs, but the moment we stepped into the hallway, she was there, standing in our path like she had been waiting all along. She didn't introduce herself. She didn't need to. Her presence was already too familiar, even though I knew I'd never met her before that day. Up close, I could see that her expression was unreadable, a strange mix of concern and authority, like she was in control of a situation I didn't understand. "We need to talk," she said softly, her voice smooth but urgent. I opened my mouth to tell her I wasn't interested, but before I could speak, she glanced down at my son and added, "It's about your husband, and about what he's trying to tell you." The words froze me in place. Every rational thought in my head told me to walk away, that this was the kind of thing grieving people get sucked into when they're vulnerable. But there was something in her tone that made me believe she knew exactly what had happened in that room, something no one else could have known unless they had seen it too. We stepped into a quiet side room, and she closed the door behind us. The air was cooler here, and I could hear the faint sound of rain starting outside. She didn't waste time with pleasantries. "Your husband didn't die in that car accident the way you were told," she said, locking eyes with me. My chest tightened, my breath caught, and my son's grip on my hand grew painful. "He was involved in something," she continued, "something that made him a target. And when he realized his time was running out, he found a way to make sure he could still reach you." I shook my head, unable to process her words. "That's not possible," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. But deep down, in that part of me that had felt his presence behind me, I knew she wasn't lying. She explained in pieces, her words painting a picture I didn't want to see. My husband had been trying to protect us from people who were after him, people who believed he had something they wanted. She claimed he'd been communicating with her for months before his death, preparing her for what might happen, and that the strange appearance today was a sign he was running out of time to get a message to me. My son spoke for the first time since we'd entered the room, his voice calm but sure. "He told me you're not the one we should be afraid of," he said to her, "but you know who is." She didn't deny it. Instead, she leaned closer and whispered, "They're already watching you. And after today, they'll know he reached you." Before I could ask who they were, a noise outside the room made her eyes snap to the door. It was a slow, deliberate knock, 3 taps, a pause, then 2 more. She went pale, and I realized she was afraid. She motioned for us to stay quiet, but the knock came again, louder this time. My son's hand was trembling in mine. The woman reached into her bag and pulled out a small, old-fashioned envelope. She pressed it into my hand with a force that made my knuckles ache. "Don't open this until you're somewhere safe," she whispered. "And when you do, you'll understand everything." Without another word, she slipped out the side door, disappearing into the rain as if she'd never been there at all. I didn't wait to find out who was knocking. I grabbed my son, and we left through the opposite exit, running across the wet parking lot to my car. My heart didn't stop pounding until we were on the road, the church shrinking in the rearview mirror. My son was quiet, staring out the window, but I could see his reflection in the glass, his brow furrowed as if he was deep in thought. Finally, he turned to me and said, "Mom." He was trying to tell me something else, but I couldn't hear it all. I asked him what he had heard, and his voice dropped to a whisper. He said, "Don't trust the man who calls himself your brother." The words hit me like ice water. I only had one brother, and he was the one who had identified my husband's body after the accident. When we got home, the envelope felt heavier in my hand than it should have. I locked the doors, drew the curtains, and sat at the kitchen table with my son beside me. The paper inside was thin, the handwriting immediately recognizable, my husband's. It was dated 3 days before the accident. The message was short, just one sentence. "Asterisk, if you're reading this, I didn't make it. They'll try to make you believe it's over. It's not. Protect our son, and whatever you do, don't let him go with your brother." Asterisk, my hands shook so badly I nearly dropped it. Everything I thought I knew about my husband's death, about my family, was unraveling. In that moment, the grief I'd been drowning in turned into something else entirely. It became resolve. Whatever this was, whatever danger my husband had died trying to shield us from, I was going to find the truth. I didn't know who was watching us or what they wanted, but I knew one thing for certain. My husband had found a way back to warn me. And if he could reach me once, he could do it again. As I sat there, the letter trembling in my hands, my son looked up at me with those same eyes that had locked on something no one else could see in that church. "Mom," he said softly, "he's here again." I froze, my pulse hammering in my ears, and before I could even turn to look, my son smiled faintly and whispered, "He says it's time for you to know everything."